Okay. Um, we left off last week in the middle of verse 4. Oh, I need my drawing tools. So I'll read verse 4 again and we'll pick up there. Oh, so much to talk about here. All right, Vayar Elohim et haor kitov. Vayavdel Elohim bein haor uvein hachoshech. And God saw the light that it was good. And God separated between the light and between the darkness. So where we left off was talking about this word tov. And we were talking about some of the kind of options of when the text says that God saw the light that it was good, of what this might mean. And kind of I think the last comment we had made was this, right? Because this word good can mean a couple different things, but but the way that this sentence is structured, at the very least, it invites the reader to imagine, is is this narrator making some kind of an actual moral statement about light, right? Like light as a physical phenomenon in the universe, does it carry moral value? I don't think that the text, I don't think the text answers that question, but at the very least, it raises it. Go ahead, Maddie.
So I've just been going down a rabbit hole about you left us with the sentence, is light intrinsically good?
Right.
And when I
Yes.
came back to my notes today, I looked at that and said, well, now that's a good question. So I
Yes, it is a good question.
sort of been going down a rabbit hole about light
Good.
and is it intrinsically good? And I got into this whole thing about the difference between light in and of itself and what light does. Like light can illumine things, and it can illumine both bad and good, but that's not the light itself.
Mm-hmm.
The light itself, I don't know, in fantasy fiction, there is lots of times when you have natural forces that are completely amoral is too strong a word, but completely neutral. They're not
Yes.
good, they're not bad, they just are.
Yes.
However, in this verse, God does indeed call the light good. If he calls the light, I told you I went down a whole thing here.
Yep.
If he
Or
calls,
I'll
stop,
interject.
go ahead.
The narrator does. God doesn't call, what God calls the light is day, but the narrator says it's good. Do you
Really?
see do you see the distinction there? In other words, well, the narrator's the one saying that God saw that the light was good.
You think that's not God speaking? To me,
No.
that's the narrator saying that God is speaking.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. So the distinction I would make is that um this is I'm only splitting hairs about the fact that we don't get an actual speech act from God at this point. That's all.
Okay.
That's really the only thing I'm saying. Does that make sense? But keep going, please.
But doesn't God, now I gotta, and God said, didn't he say, God said, let there be light? Isn't that a speech act?
Oh, the creation of light. Yes. Yes. I'm sorry, Maddie. I'm only saying in this one sentence here.
Okay.
In this one sentence. But I'm splitting hairs and I'm derailing you from your
Okay. Well,
point.
no,
So
no,
please
that's
don't let
fine.
me do that. Don't let
That's
me
fine.
keep going.
This is what we do in this class is split hairs.
Right,
No, I
right.
said it's God is calling. what God created good. At least that's what I thought God was
Right.
doing.
Yes.
Does God, what about darkness?
Right.
Does
Yes.
God create the darkness? If this is saying he separates it, God separates it
Yes.
from the light, but
Yes.
and darkness was in the beginning. That's
Right.
what was.
Exactly. Exactly.
Like I said, I tend to go in circles here. So this is
No, I love it.
I'm not there's no conclusion that I'm reaching at all. It's
Yep.
just asking
Yep.
many, many questions.
You're in the right place. Yeah. So you're exactly right, Maddie. Like the way this the way this verse is worded, it does seem to invite us to at least wonder, right? Like, is light morally good and is darkness morally evil? Right? Like the of course, like the distinction is that we don't get any statements about darkness, right? Like
Right.
I don't think the term evil, usually ra, right? Tov and ra are the two Hebrew words that are kind of opposite each other, meaning good and bad or good and evil. We don't get any statements about what's evil, right? We don't have any mention of evil until the tree of the
Right.
knowledge of good and evil in chapter
Right.
2. Yeah, but this notion of separation seems to be important, right? Like you could take out the second half of verse 4. You could take out that sentence and the story by itself would make perfect sense.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean, right? It's like you don't this notion of separation, you don't really need it. So that would seem to indicate to me that this is quite important for the author, right? The fact that the author includes it, it's not incidental, it's quite intentional, it seems to me. So let's talk about this. So um what cues do we get from the text as to what this kind of separation is? Surely it seems like it's a physical separation, right? Like light and darkness are categorically different things that are opposed to one another, right? Light and darkness they cannot cohabit the same space, right? If light and darkness are in the same space, light by definition must win.
Yeah. Right.
And if we borrow from verse 5, it seems like this verb to separate has a temporal value. In other words, what doesn't seem happening is that God is putting light over in one place and darkness over in the other place. What seems to be happening is that there's a time period that is light and a time period that is dark. And but by by reason of the names that God gives to the light and the darkness. Go ahead, Sandy.
I this might be a dumb question, but it just popped in my head.
No
It,
dumb questions.
and God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. So
Yep.
it is God. We know from the other that God is light itself. So is this saw the light a different light, or is he talking about the light that's coming from him?
Well, that's a question that's still open. We don't know where this light is coming from,
Okay.
right? So like um yeah, and what I do want to resist, I know that in the New Testament we have this statement, right, that made in First John, a direct statement, God is light.
Right.
And in the Gospel of John, we get this very, very strong, right? Like very strong connections. Like Jesus himself is called the light in the book of John. Um, which seems to reference this light from the creation narrative. Um, but let's let this text speak on its own. And we're going to keep going through. We're going to keep going through and see what other clues this narrative gives us to point to us a conclusion about what kind of light this is.
This also brought up in my mind, God divided the light from the darkness. So did God divide himself or separate himself from the darkness?
So I think that in order to make that kind of a statement, we would have to conclude beforehand that the light that's being referenced here is somehow God.
Right. And that's what
Which,
I don't know which
which,
is true, but it
right.
just makes me think about that. Is that what he's
Exactly. No, you're exactly right. The only thing I would say is that it seems like the author means for us to not equate the two. In the
Okay.
fact that God certainly looks to be pre-existent from the perspective of this narrator, whereas light has a definite beginning point, right? Like light is definitely created and
Mhm.
God is definitely not created. So it seems like the one option that the author, at least at this point, the author wants to make clear to us is that this light is somehow different than God.
Right. Okay. I get that
that
now.
that doesn't mean that the light doesn't come from God. Maybe the light does come from God, but it's different than the essence or being of God himself.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments about verse 4 in this sentence here? God separated between the light and between the darkness. I'll say that this notion of this is this repetition of the preposition between, this is how Hebrew does it, right? When we distinguish between two things in English, we say between only once, right? We'll say like between the light and the darkness. But in Hebrew, it's standard when you want to differentiate between two things, you repeat the preposition between. So there's no, this is just standard Hebrew, like between the light and between the darkness. We're going to get another instance of this verb, meaning to separate. Um, and that might shed some light on the nature of this kind of separation. I think at the very least we can say the narrator does not want us. The narrator wants to make sure that we as readers know light and darkness are not the same. Right? There is some sort of fundamental difference between these two things, if you want to call them things, although darkness isn't really a thing. Or it's a thing, but only in the abstract sense. And there's some sort of connection, right? Conceptual connection between light as a phenomenon in the universe and this concept of goodness, whether you say tov. There's something there. Um, just very quickly, this is kind of going back to Maddie's point. I see your hand, Maddie. Going several minutes ago, this word right here, Hebrew word, is pronounced ki. It's one of the most flexible Hebrew particles, and in how it is being used here is it's being used as a pair with this verb ra'ah, which means to see. So one of the uses of this particle key is it's used after verbs of perception. So verbs of seeing, hearing, knowing, those are the three big ones, but verbs of perception to indicate the thing that is perceived. So grammatically, the narrator's use of key here, what the narrator is saying is that God perceives the goodness of light, right? That light is good. Okay, Maddie, go ahead.
So if, try to get this out, you had said something about that there was some sort of distinction between light as a phenomenon when it was created and something else. I can't remember. And the light that we're talking about here, I should have written that down, but I've lost it now.
I know what you're talking about. I'll recap it in a second. Finish your question.
Okay. Maybe this is the spot. This is Genesis. This is the beginning. Maybe this is the spot where light gets identified with goodness.
Yes.
You said that the Hebrew word for bad or evil is ra,
Yes.
and we don't get that in this first chapter, right? We get that
Nope, not at all.
in Adam and Eve. So
exactly.
maybe this is how the universe was intended to be, all good, darkness as well. And it got changed
Yeah.
in the second chapter.
I can go with that. Yeah, I can go with that. For sure. So I think the distinction that you are thinking of, Maddie, is like if we say that there is light that comes from God, there's like two different options, right? We might say that it's physical light, just like any other kind of light that we might have. It's just coming from God as opposed to coming from fire or coming from the sun or coming from a star or coming from our fluorescent light, right? There might be that kind of light, but then there might also this is a bona fide theological term, especially in Christian circles, but even in some Jewish theological circles too, of this notion of uncreated light, that somehow God in his essence of himself generates light that has always been there for as long as God has existed. And that's the distinction I was meaning of, like, that it seems to me, at least a straightforward reading of this text, that we don't have the option, based on the fact that the narrator has used these verbs of existence, Yehi and Vayhi, which the author uses these verbs apparently in this story to mean things that were not there before and now they are genuinely there. Like they were non-existent and now they exist, which would seem to preclude us understanding this light as somehow God's light that comes from his own essence, uncreated light. I think that's the distinction you're talking about, Maddie, that you were referencing. Go ahead, Sandy.
I was just wondering, is the Hebrew the same as English when you have a state of being verb that a predicate nominative renames the subject, or is it an adjective that describes it? And is the it then light? And so then is good the same as light?
So you're talking about right here. So what happens? I'm gonna write on my screen here.
Okay.
So in Hebrew, this verb, haya, hey, yod, hey is how we spell it. If I add it would be comets and a comets vowel. If I add the vowel markers, oops, that one's kind of big. This verb haya in Hebrew is very often implied, or it's understood, right? So like, it's similar to like when we in English speak in the imperative, go to school, right? Like there is an understood subject, you, right? Like second person,
Yep.
you go to school. It's not spoken, it's not put in the it's not said or written, it's understood. So
Right.
this is a thing of Hebrew grammar, and not just Hebrew. A lot of languages have this. Spanish works this way, Greek works this way, Aramaic works this way.
Mhm.
That this verb haya can be understood.
Okay.
It's what we call a linking verb. So in this case, right, it makes if we understand and if we understand a verb haya that's it this moment in the text right there, that this makes perfect sense. As in the as in it was good, it referring to light, which is this word right here.
Yep. Okay.
So yes, in this case, tov would be a predicate adjective. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Bonus points to Sandy for knowing predicate adjective. My goodness, you're warming my heart.
Look who I'm married to.
It's true. It's true. It's true. Okay. So, all right, and then we have God separated between the light and between the darkness. Did someone else have their hand up? No? Okay. Vayikra Elohim laor yom, v'lachoshek kara laila. Vayehi erev, vayehi voker, yom echad. And God called out to the light day, and to the darkness he called out night. And there was evening, and there was morning, day one. So the way I read this, oh, go ahead, Sandy.
I was just wondering how you read called. You said called out. So I was
Mm-hmm.
thinking of called as meaning giving the name to. And then when you say called out, that means gives me another feeling. So which is it?
That's a great question. So this this Hebrew grammar could allow either one.
Oh, okay.
But the way I would read this is the way I translated it. In
Okay.
other words, that Yom is the thing that God called out. It's the thing that was spoken. Does
So
that make sense?
so is the action of calling, not actually giving them a name.
Or well, it is naming, but if I were to translate this verb right here, kara, as call, right in English, and
Right.
God called the light day, then I could substitute the verb name, and it would mean the same thing. And God named the light day.
Okay.
And that's and this the Hebrew grammar here could allow that, but I would under my first instinct is to understand it the other way, as if almost as if you were to put quotation marks around this word yom.
Okay.
right? So the thing that God spoke to this light was yom, this word yom, day. Does that make sense?
Yep, makes sense.
In in the in the final analysis, there's no real difference in meaning between those two things. It's the same thing, right? Like
Mhm.
um yeah, in the big picture, I think what the author is saying is that God is naming the light and naming the darkness. Right. It's just kind of like by what means does the author get there? We could we could split hairs about that.
Mhm.
Um, did someone else have a question that I missed? No, I don't think so. I think that was Sandy. Um, okay, so I'm gonna pause at this point and also say that there are a few things that we have come across so far that, at least if I'm reading this as a Hebraist, that make this sound a little bit like poetry. Um, so for example, well, no, let me back up. So, do you see these verbs here that all start with a vav? This letter that I'm highlighting, that's a vav. And you see a bunch of these verbs that start with that, right? That same letter. This is a verbal form that is a standard narrative verbal form in Hebrew, right? It's like if you were to read Kings or Judges or any other just straight up narrative, like prose, you're gonna you're gonna you're gonna come across this, right? This is like it's the storytelling verb in Hebrew. So in some way I can look at this and I can say this looks like pretty standard prose, Hebrew prose. Yet at the same time, there's a few other things I can point to and say, this kind of looks like poetry. So for example, the repeated use of this phrase is back in verse 2, over the face of the deep, and then over the face of the waters. That's kind of a standard, no, not standard. It's a common poetic device where you'll have phrases that will be almost exactly repeated, but then they'll have like one word difference or something. Um, and another thing we have is, you see how if I'm reading this very literally, let me get all the way to verse 5 here. And God called out to the light day. And now the syntactic order gets reversed. And to the darkness he called out night. That also, like, when that's also a common poetic device, that uh when you have two phrases that have similar types of structure, that in the second line they'll be flipped. So all I'm saying is that it's one of the problems about, not problems, challenges. It's one of the challenges, is that when we read this opening creation story, we can see like very strong um aspects that, like, features that are accord with prose, and we can see some features that accord with poetry.
I have seen this whole passage translated as poetry often.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know how accurate it is, but I've seen and performed. I've seen people, read it
Yes.
aloud as poetry.
Yeah, yes. Yes. Now we're going to get down, once we get down to verse 27, verse 27 is like unmistakable poetry, right? It's like once you get, if you're familiar with Hebrew poetry, once you get to verse 27, it's like the poetic meter gets like turned up to epic, right? It's like there are three phrases in verse 27. You're like, oh yes, this is a Hebrew triplet, right? Like, it's unmistakable. Um, okay, so now in verse 5, we get what clues do we get now regarding what kind of light this is? I'm hovering over the very important word here, yom, which means day, right? Um,
Well, it's like you said earlier, it's a temporal. It now has a time factor. Um,
yes,
there's a day and
yes,
there's a night. We haven't gotten down to, 12 hours and 12 hours or whatever like that, but
right.
there's
That's the next sentence, right?
oh, really?
Yes. Go ahead,
Um,
Maddie. I'm sorry.
no, but it's obviously it's interesting how it goes from creating light, then separating light from darkness, and then calling that separation day and night. It
Yes.
builds on each other.
Yes, absolutely it does. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, there seems to be a physical thing. It's not just spiritualized, or I don't know.
Right.
It's like it's a real thing.
Yes. And specifically daylight, right?
Hmm.
Like this does not like it seems like light of fire would be precluded here, right?
Yeah.
Ah,
Right? And it seems like light of lightning would be precluded here, as well as the light of the moon. It would seem to be precluded here. Do you see what I mean, right? It's like the light that we see during daylight hours that appears to be the type of kind of light that is in view.
Right.
So
So
this
to
So
me,
would,
that means different than God's light.
depending on how scientific a lens through which you right, how strict a scientific lens you want to read this text through, but yes, yes. Go ahead, Jess, you were about to say something.
oh, I was just kind of thinking out loud. So considering that this light is called day, would this be more kind of the light, for lack of a better word, around the planet Earth, um, that we see like in the daytime versus light coming from outer space, which I mean, stars haven't been created yet, so it's not coming from them. But
Right.
would it be referring more to light kind of surrounding the Earth versus, I don't know, I guess maybe spread out
Yes.
through space,
And
which I guess maybe space wasn't even space wasn't created yet, maybe. So there was nowhere for it to spread out.
yeah, well, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. I mean, it seems like there's earth and there's water, and now there's light. But this is just what you bring up is the very challenging thing about this text is that at some point, like right around here in the narrative, now we're starting to guess about what was in the mind of the original author, right? Um, how right? How did this ancient author understand daylight? Right, and this is where, particularly in the 20th century, there's lots of different ideas that are out there. So there's some commentators, or some, yes, there are some commentators that read this and they actually think there is a spatial, right, that the author had a spatial conceptualization, that there's a region of light and a region of darkness that over the course of a day rotates around the earth, right? And um there's some, right, that would read this as that it's ethereal light that's just diffused in the cosmos, And for a while it turns on, and then for a while it turns off until like the sun takes over the job of providing daylight for the earth. Um, yeah. So at some point we're doing guessing games, right? In terms of, um, yeah, in terms of how does this author, right, conceptualizing daylight? Um, but I think the main point though is that as soon as we get to this point in the narrative where God sees the light and calls it day, our options about what kind of light this is, they get really narrow, right? We don't have all that many more options anymore. Oh, another theory is that, and I've already told you what I think about this theory, but it was common in the 20th century that ancient Israelites, or all the ancient cultures, they conceptualized as daylight different than the sun. That daylight is a different kind of light, and that this story is trying to provide the technical term would be etiology, right? Like the story of how both of these kinds of light came to being. But I don't think the evidence supports that conclusion. I agree with the guy who wrote his dissertation on this was named David Rees in the late 90s, and I think he's exactly right. He argues very strongly that ancient Near Eastern peoples, and they always knew that daylight came from the sun. And I think he's right. The evidence seems to, in my view, the evidence seems to to warrant that conclusion. But these phenomena of light and darkness appear like here, right? Like it's like we're reading about the genesis of the temporal regularity we observe in the universe from Earth, of celestial light during the day and celestial darkness during night. Yep, Maddie.
Oh, I am. All right. And the author is further refining it in the next line, where now we're in
Exactly.
morning and evening. Now it's not
Yes,
just light and dark. Now this is really temporal. Now we've got
exactly.
evening and morning. So he's sort of
Yes.
structuring this. He's telling a story, and he's sort of
Yes, he is.
building it up, this plot, and focusing in on what we have, what the world is like where he is.
Yep. Oh, I couldn't have said it.
How it got there.
I couldn't have said it any better. Right. So this word erev here, means evening. This is the time. What this word means in Hebrew, it's the time of transition in between. Erev is the period of time in between when the sun goes down and when the sky is dark. That's erev. And this word boker, that's the period of time in between when you can see daylight, right? When you see daylight starting and when the sun comes up, right? It's the time of, so Erev is the time of transition from light to darkness, and Boker is the time of transition from darkness to light. So in
Why
case there's
don't
any
they-
doubt, right, the author is saying, oh, go ahead, Carmen.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Why
No,
don't
no, no.
why
No,
doesn't
no.
anybody translate it as dusk and dawn? Because we have words for that time also in English.
Because the sun
why evening
because
and
the
morning?
sun is not because the sun has not been created yet. And so so I'm sorry, but this word, it's a temporal word, right? Erev is a temporal word. There is another word that means evening twilight, neshef.
Hmm.
Neshef is twilight, and oh, now my memory is failing me. Sha'ar. Sha'ar? I think it's Sha'ar is dawn. It's been a while since I've um I think it's Sha'ar with an aleph instead of an ayin. I'll have to look that up. But the point is that these are temporal words. They're not visual words. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I still think that we that's a better English word. I mean, there's not a
Oh
perfect
yeah,
we don't have a word for that in English. We don't have a word for the transition time
right.
every
You're
12
exactly right. Yep.
hours. But
Yep.
that's a very different um idea to call it to say evening and morning because
Yep.
it's still a time phrase in English, but it's a much broader
Yes, exactly.
period of
Yep.
time.
No, you're right. Go ahead, Sandy.
I was just wondering or thinking about the Jewish people when their day starts in the evening and goes to the next evening. Is that where they get this from? When they celebrate in their calendars and things, go
Yeah.
from the evening to the morning.
So that's a good question because I want to be careful. Because so that especially applies to Shabbat, right? So
Right.
the the practice of Sabbath, and that does come from Torah, right? Like the celebration of Sabbath is supposed to begin on the evening prior. But it's not like, at least in the Hebrew Bible, it's not like the ancient Israelites considered every day started at sunset of the evening before. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I never even thought about that. I just know the Sabbath and
Right.
studied that, and that's
But what I do think is important to note is the order, right? Like the movement of the days of creation is not period of light followed by a period of darkness. The order is a period of darkness followed by a period of light,
hmm.
which mimics the movement of the story as a whole. You see, right? We don't start with light and then move into darkness. The story starts with darkness and moves into light.
Yes. I never thought about it that way. Good point.
Yeah. And this is an aside, right? But like
Right.
if you keep reading in the Hebrew Bible, the Hebrew prophets who have visions of the end of time, like um talk about the end of time as this process being completed. Like at some time when God's physical presence will come to the world, and then there is no such thing as night anymore. Right? It's like God God supersedes the sun and the moon and brings constant light in the physical universe. That's how um the prophets who have visions about what I would call the eschaton, or like end of the world, or what appears to be, that's how they seem to talk about that. And then one final thing for sure to talk about is that, so you see how when I hover over this word echad, you see how in English it's translated as first. This word in Hebrew is not first. This Hebrew is one. So
Hmm.
there's a difference between what we call cardinal numbers and ordinal numbers. So cardinal numbers are 1, 2, 3, 4, and ordinal numbers are numbers that delineate order, right, or sequence. First, second, third. Yeah, and if you dig deep into this, you could find um you can find all commentators have a lot to say about this. That here on the first day, we don't get the word for first, we get the word for one. the tricky thing about that is that like and once we get to chapter 2, we're going to see the same thing again when the 4 rivers are listed, right? The first river is listed as not first but one, echad, just like this. So some commentators conclude that this is that the author is doing something, intentionally doing something different by saying one day instead of first day. And there are other commentators that say, no, this is just, for whatever reason, this is how Hebrews did lists. Is they didn't use the ordinal for one, they used cardinal. Which is why I'm assuming, having never talked to any of the people on any of these translation committees, I would assume that that's how all these translation committees are understanding this word, and so they're not making a big deal about the distinction. Go ahead, Carmen.
Is it, I don't know, like from the Hebrew translation, should it be one day or day one? And I know that kind of, you have to answer that question that you just posed, but from a grammar perspective, is it legitimate to, I don't know how that would work with the order, because in English you change the order of the adjective, I guess, and that
Right.
would kind of change the meaning, right? One day versus day one. But I don't know if in Hebrew that would make a difference at all.
So, if I understand, understanding this is the yom is the word for day, which is a noun. Echad is the number 1, which is an adjective. This is normal noun adjective order for Hebrew. So one day as opposed to day one. However, and Jess is I can see Jess is smiling already because she's in my Hebrew class. However, with numbers in Hebrew, you got to throw all the rules out the window, right? It's like none of the grammatical rules apply to numbers. And so we really don't have like when you come to numbers, the numbers can disagree in gender, they can be in weird placement. So the point is that I wouldn't make I could not make a decision on that based simply on Hebrew grammar as to whether I should understand this as one day or day one. Go ahead, Sandy.
I was just wondering if the word day has can be called by a certain amount of time.
Very good. Oh, this is great. I'm so glad you asked this question, because I get very frustrated with people who make a big deal about this word day in the Genesis 1 narrative, and they don't read carefully enough, at least in my opinion. So if you see how this word yom, day, here in this sentence, it's being used to refer to what appears to be a 12-hour period of time. It's the time of the light. Whereas here, it seems to refer to both the time period of the light and the darkness, like what we would call a 24-hour period. And such is the nature of language, right? Like, that this word day, if you were to do a survey of the word yom in Hebrew, you would find that this word day can it can refer to the time period when you see the sun, like when the sun is visible. It can refer to the time period of light during the day. It can refer to a 24-hour period. It can refer to some sort of unspecified period. The point is it's extremely flexible.
Okay. That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, it's extremely flexible.
Is that article the for the first day, is that actually there or is that supplied for English?
Oh, it is supplied for English.
Okay.
It is supplied for English. And let me, because if I'm not mistaken, I think sometimes on some of the days of creation, the article is there and sometimes it's not. I'm just looking quickly. First 3 days, it's not there. No, maybe is it the sixth day? Maybe it's the sixth day that's there. Yeah. This right here, day the sixth. So that what I'm hovering over, that's the definite article. But
Okay.
I think that's the only day of creation where you have of the six where you have the definite article there. Um, okay. Any questions or thoughts before we still got 5 minutes left. I'll move on to verse 6 unless you guys want to talk about something more. Okay. Vayomer Elohim Yehi Rakia Betoch Hamayim Vihi Mavdil Bein Mayim Lamayim. And God said, let there be, I'm going to say a vault in the midst of the waters. And let there be a separation between the waters to the waters. Between the waters to the waters. So this is very similar to what we've seen in day one. Same verb, yehi, like let there be. But we have two different statements, right? So we have let there be there, yehi, and again here, let there be. This word rakia is really interesting. I like the gloss vault for this. The King James translates firmament, which is really interesting. It's an interesting word. It's because we don't really use it in modern day English at all. But you'll notice that it has the word firm in it. Firm. So like something of substance, which is what you also see in the New Revised Standard. Also a dome, which we think of something, right? Some sort of physical barrier. Go ahead, Maddie.
That was actually exactly what I was looking at, was the translation from vault to firmament, and then the NRSV has dome.
Right.
So that's what, and that's only three translations, and I bet it's even more.
Yes.
So it's interesting. What silly question, but do you have any idea what the Hebrews thought of as a vault? I mean, is this, we're talking about
So,
something that's separating the waters now.
yep.
So
So what I can tell you, the conceptual, like the basis of this verb. So you see how in this particular lexicon, it has this phrase, as if beaten out. As if beaten out. So right, like the concept from which this word is derived is like a metal worker, right? So if not from gilding, but it's kind of that idea. So like let's say you had an object that you wanted to cover with a malleable metal like gold. You might put gold on this object and then beat it out with a hammer to extrude it. Not extrude it. That's not the right word. Extrude is when you pull metal through an opening. I can't remember the verb, but it's like if you beat something with a hammer to make it smooth and flat. That's the
Hmm.
like the concrete thing in the real world from which this word is derived. And there are other times where like this notion of we see this other times in the Hebrew Bible where God is referred to as beating out the firmament. The tricky thing about that is that just because that's the concept, like the physical concrete concept, does not mean that how the author is indicating a literal sense of that word, because like words have abstract senses all the time. Let me pause right there. What I just said, does that make sense? So a good example is this is kind of a silly example, but if I say the head of a mountain, right? Like you know that I don't mean a mountain that has a literal head like you and I have a head, right? What I'm referring to is the top of the mountain. Or if I say the foot of the mountain, I don't mean that a mountain has an actual foot. I mean the very bottom of the mountain. Does that make sense? Like in those cases, that those words head and foot, right? They have a concrete meaning, but that meaning has been to some degree made abstract. And that's what we don't know we don't know if that might be happening here. Whether this author, in using that word rakia, means like a literal surface that's been beaten out with a hammer, or if that's simply a metaphorical, right, an abstract, or is using that physical concept to conceptualize an abstract divider. Okay, that's where we have to stop. Good,
Okay.
but that's worth thinking about for next time, right? Because and keep thinking about the primeval history of what other kinds of clues might we get about this firmament or vault, like whether it's what kind of barrier is this?